In the quiet town of Willow Creek, where the rustling of leaves and chirping of crickets painted the evening air with a tranquil melody, lived a young girl named Lila. With her fiery red hair and eyes that sparkled like dew on clovers, she was a picture of innocence and curiosity. Her days were filled with the simple joys of climbing trees and playing hide and seek with her friends, her laughter echoing through the streets as the sun dipped below the horizon. But there was something about Lila that was far from ordinary. Lila had a peculiar habit of collecting peculiar things. Her bedroom was a treasure trove of oddities, from the jar of buttons she found in her grandma's attic to the old key she discovered in the park that didn't seem to fit any lock. Her mother often sighed, amused by her daughter's eccentricity, while her father nodded approvingly, seeing a kindred spirit in her. They knew she had an imagination that could outshine any fireworks display. One muggy afternoon, after a particularly intense game of tag that left her panting and sweaty, Lila decided to take refuge in the cool embrace of the town library. It was her favorite place to be, a sanctuary filled with secrets and adventures waiting to be unlocked by the turn of a page. She wandered through the aisles, her eyes scanning the spines of books that towered above her like sentinels of knowledge. A dusty, leather-bound book caught her eye, its title faded but intriguing. The Shadowed Paths of Old. "What's this?" she murmured to herself, her curiosity piqued. She pulled the book from the shelf, feeling the weight of its age in her small hands. The librarian, Mrs. Henshaw, looked up from her desk, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the book. "Lila," she called out, her voice a mix of surprise and caution. "That's not a storybook for little girls." Ignoring the warning, Lila cracked open the cover, her eyes devouring the yellowed pages. The book spoke of hidden places in Willow Creek, areas shrouded in whispers and folklore. It spoke of the old cemetery on the edge of town, where the ghosts of forgotten souls were said to wander. It spoke of the abandoned house in the woods, where a family had once lived before vanishing without a trace. And it spoke of something else, something that made her heart race and her palms sweat. It spoke of a creature that lurked in the shadows, watching, waiting, unseen by all but the most curious of eyes. "You really shouldn't read that," dear Mrs. Henshaw said, approaching Lila with a gentle yet firm stride. But Lila was already lost in the words, her imagination running wild with the possibilities. She felt a strange connection to the book, as if it were speaking directly to her. As the librarian reached out to take the book away, she read one final line that sent a shiver down her spine to find the truth. "You must first dare to look." The library door creaked open, and a gust of wind sent a shiver down Lila's spine. She looked up, expecting to see her mother or one of her friends, but instead she was met with a man dressed all in black. He had a tall, lanky frame and a face that was as pale as the pages she held in her hand. His eyes, however, were what truly captured her attention. They were as dark as the night sky, swirling with a mysterious energy that seemed almost hungry. "Is everything okay here?" Mrs. Henshaw asked, her voice wavering slightly. The man's gaze remained fixed on Lila, a strange smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Yes, I just need some help with this book," Lila said, her voice small and trembling. The man's smile grew wider, revealing teeth that were unnaturally sharp. "I think I can help you with that," he said, extending a long, bony finger to the book. His touch was cold, like the metal of a forgotten gravestone. "But beware, little one. Some secrets are better left untold." With those words, he turned and disappeared into the stacks, leaving Lila alone with Mrs. Henshaw and her racing thoughts. The librarian's face had paled, and she took the book from Lila's hands, her eyes scanning the pages with a look of dread. "You shouldn't have read that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That book is not for the faint of heart." The rest of the afternoon, Lila couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled into her bones. She tried to focus on her homework and ignore the whispers that seemed to echo in her mind, but they grew louder with each passing hour. When nightfall came, she found herself unable to sleep, the images from the book's pages playing like a macabre slideshow behind her eyelids. The next day, she decided to explore the town with new eyes, looking for the shadowed paths that the book had described. Her friends thought she had gone mad, chasing after ghosts and monsters in broad daylight. But Lila was determined to uncover the truth, driven by a force she didn't fully understand. As she approached the old cemetery, the air grew colder, the shadows longer. The tombstones looked as if they were leaning in, whispering secrets to one another that no living soul was meant to hear. Lila felt a strange pull, as if the very earth beneath her was guiding her steps. She knew she was getting closer to something, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. Her heart pounding in her chest, she pushed open the creaking gate and stepped onto the overgrown grass. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, and the silence was so thick it was almost tangible. Then she heard a soft, almost imperceptible rustling that grew louder with each step she took. It was the sound of something moving through the graves, something that didn't belong in the light of day. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she knew she wasn't alone. Slowly she turned, her eyes searching the shadows that danced among the headstones. And there was a figure, tall and hunched, with those same dark eyes that had haunted her dreams the night before. And the creature from the book. The creature's smile grew wider, and Lila felt a cold hand wrap around her wrist. Her heart raced as she looked into the abyss of its gaze, and she knew that she had made a mistake. She had looked where she shouldn't have, and now she had to face the consequences. The creature began to pull her deeper into the cemetery, and she could feel the coldness of its grip seeping into her very soul. But she wasn't going to go quietly. With a surge of courage that surprised even her, she yanked her hand free and sprinted towards the gate, her feet pounding the dirt path. Behind her, she heard a chilling laugh, the sound of something ancient and malevolent taking delight in her terror. The wind picked up, carrying with it the whispers of the long dead, urging her on. Lila didn't look back, didn't dare to see if it was gaining on her. She just ran, her heart pumping adrenaline through her veins like a roaring river. As she reached the gate, she felt a warm hand on her shoulder, and she spun around, expecting to see the creature's twisted grin. Instead, she found her father's concerned face. "Lila, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice a welcome reprieve from the eerie silence. Breathless and trembling, she pointed back to the shadows. The creature from the book, she managed to say. Her father looked at her with confusion, his gaze searching the cemetery. "There's no such thing, sweetie," he said, his voice soothing. "It's just your imagination playing tricks on you." But Lila knew what she had seen, and the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. He sighed, taking her hand. "Let's go home. We can talk about it there." As they walked back, the whispers grew fainter, the shadows less menacing. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, watching her, waiting for another opportunity to pull her into its world of darkness. That night, Lila lay in bed, the moon casting a pale glow through her window. She had told her father about the book and the creature, but he had only chuckled, patting her head reassuringly. "It's just a story, Lila," he had said. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But the whispers in her mind grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of the creature's name, a name she had read but couldn't quite remember. It was a name that held power, a name that could either save her or doom her. The following day, unable to resist the siren call of the unknown, Lila returned to the library, the book still tucked safely in her backpack. Mrs. Henshaw was nowhere to be seen, and the air was heavy with the scent of dust and ancient secrets. Her heart hammering in her chest, she approached the bookshelf where she had found the shadowed paths of old, but it was gone. In its place was a gaping hole, as if the book had never been there at all. Panic surged through her as she searched the library, her eyes darting from shelf to shelf. It had to be here, it had to. Her thoughts raced with the possibility that the creature had taken it, that it didn't want her to learn its true name. Her eyes fell upon a small, leather-bound journal tucked in a corner, almost as if it had been left there for her to find. With trembling hands, she opened it to the first page. It was filled with the same cryptic writing she had seen in the book. And there it was, staring back at her, the name she had been searching for. The name that could either be her salvation or her damnation. The creature's name was Moros. It seemed to burn into Lila's mind as she stared at the journal entry. Her heart raced, and she could almost hear the creature's chilling laugh echoing in the empty library. She knew she had to keep looking, to find out more about Moros before it was too late. Her eyes scanned the pages, her mind racing with questions. Why was she chosen? What did it want from her? And most importantly, how could she stop it? The words in the journal spoke of ancient rituals and spells, of a time when Willow Creek had been plagued by darkness that could only be held at bay by those who dared to wield the power of the written word. The whispers grew stronger, swirling around her like a chilling mist. She could feel Moros's presence, taunting her, urging her to come closer. With a deep breath she stood, the journal clutched tightly to her chest. She had to leave the library, to find a place where she could think clearly, without the creature's influence clouding her thoughts. The moment she stepped outside, the whispers grew faint again. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town that seemed to stretch like the creature's tendrils, reaching out for her. She knew she had to act fast. Her friends and family were in danger, and she was the only one who knew the truth. Lila decided to visit Mr. Jenkins, the town's old historian. He lived in a small, cluttered house at the end of Elm Street, surrounded by books and artifacts that held the secrets of Willow Creek's past. She hoped he would have some insight into Moros and how to defeat it. The door creaked open, and she stepped into a room that smelled of old paper and dust. Mr. Jenkins looked up from his desk, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. His eyes widened when he saw the journal in her hand. "Lila," he said, his voice trembling with age and perhaps fear. "What have you found?" Her story spilled out in a rush, the words tumbling over each other as she recounted her encounter with the creature and her desperate search for answers. The historian listened, his expression growing graver with each passing moment. "You've stumbled upon something much greater than you can imagine," he said finally. "Moros is an ancient spirit, one that feeds on fear and the unspoken secrets of this town. It's been here for centuries, hiding in the shadows, growing stronger with each whisper and untold truth." Mr. Jenkins took the journal from her, his gnarled fingers tracing the name with a tremor. "To banish Moros, you must find the source of its power, a talisman that holds the essence of its true form. It's hidden somewhere in the house of the last person who knew how to control it. But beware. It won't be easy to find, and Moros will do anything to keep you from it." Armed with the historian's words, Lila felt a new determination welling up inside her. She knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, but she was not about to let fear win. This was her town, her home, and she would not let it fall to the creature's clutches. With the setting sun painting the sky with shades of crimson and gold, she set off into the deepening shadows, her heart beating like a drum as she approached the abandoned house in the woods. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but she ignored them, focusing instead on the warmth of the journal against her chest and the name that held the key to her salvation, Moros. The house loomed before her, its windows like empty eye sockets watching her approach. The trees bent and twisted around it, their branches gnarled into a forbidding embrace. The door, once a proud shade of blue, now hung askew on its hinges, beckoning her with a creak that sent shivers down her spine. As she stepped over the threshold, the whispers grew to a cacophony, a chorus of lost souls begging for release. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, a stark reminder of the time that had passed since the house had last known the touch of the living. Her eyes scanned the cluttered rooms, searching for any sign of the talisman Mr. Jenkins had mentioned. Each step she took echoed through the empty halls, the cobwebs brushing against her face like ghostly fingers. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own, the walls groaning with the weight of the secrets they held. She pushed aside a dusty curtain, revealing a hidden staircase that spiraled down into the bowels of the house. With a deep breath, she descended into the darkness, her only light the flickering beam of a flashlight she had brought from home. The basement was damp and cold, the smell of earth and mold heavy in the air. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it, a gleaming object that pulsed with an eerie light. The talisman. It was a crystal, its facets reflecting the dim light like 1,000 stars. The whispers grew to a fever pitch as she reached out to touch it, and she could feel Moros's anger, its presence swelling around her like a malevolent storm. But she was not deterred. She knew what she had to do. Gripping the talisman tightly, she spoke the name she had learned from the journal. "Moros," she said, her voice strong and steady. "I know your true name, and with it, I claim your power." The room grew colder still, the air crackling with an unseen energy. The whispers turned to shrieks as the creature materialized before her, its eyes burning with a hunger that could devour worlds. But Lila was ready. The creature lunged, its shadowy form solidifying into something tangible and terrifying. But she was faster, holding the crystal aloft like a beacon. The light grew brighter, piercing the darkness and driving the creature back with a howl of rage. The battle was fierce, the house shaking with the force of their wills clashing. But Lila had the power of truth on her side, and with each invocation of Moros's name, the creature's power waned. Finally, with a thunderous boom, the crystal shattered, releasing a burst of light that filled the room, obliterating the shadows. The creature let out a final, desolate scream and disappeared, leaving only the echo of its rage behind. Exhausted but triumphant, Lila emerged from the house, the whispers silenced. She knew the town of Willow Creek would never be the same, but she had faced her fear and come out the other side. The whispers had stopped, the shadows no longer danced with malicious intent. The night was quiet again, the stars twinkling like the eyes of the souls she had freed. She walked back home, her steps lighter than air. The town would always remember the night Moros was vanquished, the night their quiet lives were forever changed by a girl with fiery hair and a heart full of courage. And as she lay in bed, the moon casting a gentle glow through her window, she knew she would never forget the shadowed paths she had dared to tread.